Hey everybody, welcome back to the 80s Slashers YouTube channel. In this video, we will be going back to take a look at the year 1986 and all of the slasher films released that year. So, coming after the dismal year for slashers that was 1985, it wasn't going to be very difficult for 1986 to be considered somewhat of a bounce back year. And that is exactly what it was, in my opinion, of course. It did this in not only the quality of the films released, but also by, in hindsight, the importance of the types of films that were released. Now, as cliched and perhaps as corny as it may sound, I view 1986 as the year of new beginnings within the slasher genre. Kind of ironic since, we actually had a film with that as its subtitle in 1985 with the, Friday the 13th Part 5. Now, there's a few reasons why I feel this way. First and most obviously is just the sheer quantity of films that were released in 1986 as compared to 1985. In my opinion, it seemed that there was a hesitancy for filmmakers to release slasher films in 1985 after the controversy surrounding the film Silent Night, Deadly Night near the end of 1984. Now, if you're not familiar with this controversy, you can go back to the videos I covered in both the 1984 and the 1985 year in slashers videos. So we go a little more in depth of what exactly happened. So if you want to check that out, go back and check those out. Now, once this controversy seemed to dissipate a little bit, it didn't take very long into 1986 when these types of films began to be released again within the theaters. And it's not like this trend didn't stop in 1986 either. In subsequent years, through the rest of the decade, through 87, 88, 89, we would see some of these years with even greater quantities of films released. Some of these years having the most films released in the entire decade. So yeah, now another reason, besides the sheer quantity of films being released, that 1986 can be viewed as kind of a year of new beginnings is because at this point in the 80s, a clear shift was beginning to occur with the type of slasher that was being made and released. The tried and tested, standard formula that a majority of these films followed in the early 80s, this was slowly starting to disappear, being replaced by not only a new type of formula, but also by a new delivery method for viewing these films for, its slasher-loving audiences. But we will get into all of that in just a little bit. But before we do that, let's just go ahead and take a quick look at just a brief overview of the year. So yeah, when we take a look here, just briefly, the total number of slashers that I have put out in 1986 is at 13. Now, like I say in all these videos, this number is, my number of the films that I view as, an 80s slasher that fit the formula, that feel like an 80s slasher to me. Some people may feel like this film's left off. I may view them as more of like a thriller. I may view them more as, strictly giallo. Just, these 13 films are the ones in 86 that I feel, fit the bill for the most part. Now, in terms of box office sales, we have just over $33 million, which is pretty good. But as we get later into the 80s, the amount of information available is getting less and less. So I believe the $33 million is only off of 3 films that I have information for. So, yeah, so for 3 films, 33 million, that's a good number. And a couple films did really well this year. So, it's incomplete information for sure, but I feel that it was still a fairly successful year for the slasher film. Now, as I always talk about, the holiday themed films, the films that, have some sort of a special day or a holiday or an event in the title, like your Friday the 13th, your graduation day, your prom night, your New Year's Eve, that sort of thing. In the early 80s, that was a big trend. We've seen it slowly decline a little bit. 86 had 2 of them. Number of franchise films, there's just the one this year. Number of straight-to-video releases, we have 3. And I put down number of foreign films at 1. Now, usually I like to do a little, year versus year comparison from the year like the previous year. For this particular year, I figured doing 85 versus 86 isn't really an accurate comparison. So I decided to put up 84 versus 85 versus 86, because really 1984 was kind of the last true year for the the slasher film. That was kind of a regular year, whereas 85, like I said, was kind of an anomaly. So I put all 3 on here. So like I said, from 84 to 86 there, like they each had 13 films released. So, pretty steady. Of course, the 85 had the 6 films. Box office sales, you can see a downward trend. 84 was a really solid year. That was heavily anchored by, a couple of the really big franchise films that did really well. And the same can be said for 85. There's only 6 films, but almost $52 million. It did really well at the box office. Again, based on, a Friday film and a Nightmare on Elm Street film. And like I said, 86, the numbers are down from what we have, but this is from the information that we have. And, I feel like it was still a successful year, like I said earlier. Now, the number of holiday films, as you can see, it's kind of, 84 had 3, 86 had 2. So it is slowly starting to decline a little. And, franchise films, it's, there's really, at this point, there's the most it could ever be was really 3. If you throw in the Halloween films, which, we're going to see some of those in, the later 80s there. So yeah, the biggest difference, year to year, obviously, is the number of films released per year, especially when you look at 85 to 86. When we look at all of the years in the 80s so far, the films released, it's been pretty steady. Obviously, when you get to 81 and 82, that was the peak. There was 20 some films released a year. And then, from 82 on, we see a slow decline. Again, 85, you kind of have to, it's kind of an anomaly for that year. But, once we get to later years, 87, 88, 89, these numbers are going to go right back up, almost to the highs of 81 and 82. So, it'll be interesting. So we'll get to those years when we get to them. But greater numbers are definitely coming for this genre. All right, so yeah, so that was just kind of a quick little overview of the year. So now let's actually take a look at these films. Which ones we're talking about. So first up, we have Girls' School Screamers. Follow that, we have Chopping Mall. Then we had April Fool's Day. followed by Blood Hook. Then we had Killer Party, followed by Evil Laugh. Then we had Night Ripper, Terror at Tenkiller. Then we have the Friday franchise film on here, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. After that, we have Sorority House Massacre, followed by Body Count. And the last two films released in '86, we have Slaughter High, and closing out the year is Dreamaniac. Yeah, so, yeah, when we take a look at all these films here, this is in my opinion, this is a really, really solid list of films. There's a lot of films in here that I really like, and a lot of films that, looking back now, they've kind of stood the test of time. A lot of these films are still popular. They have, a Blu-ray release, or some of these are getting Blu-ray releases. And that kind of speaks to the demand for them. There's people like these films, and they want to have them, they want to own them in their collection. So this is a solid list of films, in my opinion, for sure. Now, once again, we have a nice little mix, of types and styles of slashers that were released in '86, and we also have some interesting trends that I'm seeing to begin to happen here. So first up, like I said, we always have, it seems like, at least one foreign slasher release, and in '86 we had Body Count. This film came from Italy. Now, technically, I guess you could, if you're speaking strictly from, like, the United States, Killer Party is a Canadian film. So, you could include that as a foreign film as well, but, usually for, like, North American releases, Body Count would be the single foreign slasher released in '86. Now, we take a look, again, the holiday theme films. Of course, we have, every year it almost seems like we have a Friday the 13th. And this year we also have an April Fool's Day, which is great, a really good title for, a holiday theme slasher. But like I said, these films are not, as the years go on in the '80s, they're becoming not as prevalent the last few years, and this is probably simply due to the fact that there's just not many holidays. They've all been covered. You got, like, your prom day, or prom night, your graduation day, New Year's Evil. You got all the Christmas and the Halloween and the Friday the 13th. We got Bloody Birthday. Almost everything you can think of, we've had one almost now. Mother's Day. It's nice in '86 they snuck in April Fool's Day. That like I said, it's a good one. So, but yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. There's not too many of them at this point. Now, another trend that starting to develop is the straight to video releases. Now, 1986, basically at this point, VCRs are starting to gain popularity in many homes. Some of these, lower budget titles that, were trying to, cut costs, did so even further by, releasing them, straight to VHS, bypassing the whole, theatrical release. And, even in some of these were being shot on video, not being shot on film. And this is a trend that is going to continue into the late '80s and the early '90s. And, it becomes a large part of the home video market. Obviously, there's roots within the slasher genre itself, earlier than '86, of, films shot on video, or films, released straight to video. But, '86 appears to be the year that it kind of starts to maybe pick up some momentum. I know this is the time when, not just the slasher market, just, like, you got, like other horror movies, and and action films, and kung fu, martial arts films. These straight to video releases were gaining traction in all genres. So it makes sense. It's also you know it's coming out in the slasher genre as well. Now, the last trend that I've noticed is the rise of the supernatural slasher. Now, again, we've had examples, in previous years of supernatural slashers, but 1986, it appears that they're becoming, a little more and more frequent. Now, if you look here, we have, Sorority House Massacre has a few, a few elements, Dreamaniac, Killer Party, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. This is the point in the Friday franchise where they turn supernatural. Up until this point, the killers, either Mrs. Voorhees or Jason Voorhees, have been human. And there wasn't really many at all supernatural elements there in those films. Friday the 13th at this point turns supernatural. This is the beginning of what we call zombie Jason. So the franchise probably saw what was going on. The trend was heading this way, and they jumped on board. It didn't hurt that it kind of fit with the story of where they were in the franchise. But yeah, even like the biggest slasher franchise is getting on board. And then of course we have Girl Squirrel Screamers and Chopping Mall. And I know Chopping Mall it's kind of a weird one. It's not really a human slasher, like the killers are robots, but the way that they come to life and whatnot is kind of supernatural, and it fits in with the whole trend that's starting there. So the question is why? Like what's going on? Why the supernatural slasher is becoming a thing? And well, the answer is to me anyway, it's pretty obvious, and it's Freddy Krueger and the rise of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. The in 1984, when that first film was released, it did incredibly well. People just loved that film. Word of mouth spread. It did really well at the box office. And it's mostly due to like the concept. I think like the concept was, it terrified people. A killer like that gets you in your dreams, and there's no escaping. There's no. It's a really interesting and scary concept. It really was. And people also loved Freddy Krueger. He was scary, he was creepy, and he was kind of funny. He had that cool factor. So yeah, I'm sorry, the Nightmare on Elm Street films, they were a big hit. They did really well, and to be honest, the slasher genre at this point was probably getting a little stale, or at least a little oversaturated with the formula that was established all the way back in the original Friday the 13th. The Nightmare films kind of rejuvenated the genre, and the box office returns kind of proved it. People will start going crazy for these types of films, and so that's what this genre is kind of a copycat genre, and so that's what happened. Now, yes, I don't know. That's just kind of an interesting thing, kind of a couple, interesting tidbits that this year seems to offer. Now, one more last tidbit. This might not be for everybody, but something interesting that I kind of came across this year. 1986 also is the year that an actress named Kim McKamey starred in two 80s slashers in 86. Evil Laugh and Dreamaniac. And for those who may not know, Kim McKamey went on from these slasher films to have a quite successful career in the adult film industry under the name Ashlyn Gear. And it's just kind of funny because a lot of people associate the 80s slasher genre with the adult film industry, because it's lower budget. They kind of have, some of these films have similar looks and feels to them, and some of the directors and production people in the adult film industry have directed movies under different names in the 80s slasher genre, and they go back and forth, so they kind of go hand in hand a little bit. And there's other actresses in other films who have gone on to star in adult films as well. So it's just kind of an interesting thing, It's I feel like there's kind of like a stereotype, like, these actresses, if they're starting in cheesy 80s horror films, and if they can't make it, they go on to, the next step in their career is the adult film industry. And in the case of Kim McKinney, that's exactly what happened. So anyway, I just thought just one kind of little interesting tidbit about 1986. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the release schedule here. So we see here January, February, nothing got released, but then in March, and April, and May, we have 5 films that got released. Now this is kind of unusual because usually the beginning of the year is the slow point for the slasher genre. Not a lot get put out. Usually it's come summertime and into the fall, the Halloween and the Christmas season is when these films usually show up in the theaters, and they kind of have to reset at the beginning of the year. But again, January, February, not much, but as soon as March comes, they're starting to show up. So it's kind of odd, and like I said, it's how I said earlier, that I feel like the filmmakers just couldn't wait to get the genre going again. After the lull of 1985, they may have had some queued up, ready to go, and they're just waiting for the controversy to kind of settle down a little bit. And yeah, we got a good little bump of films right out of the gate. Now in June here, you'll see I have I have some stars next season, and basically what it means, I don't actually have, or I couldn't find a release date for these 3 films: Evil Laugh, Night Ripper, and Terror at Tenkiller. Now, as you remember from earlier, Night Ripper and Terror at Tenkiller, along with Dreamaniac, are the 3 films that were straight to video releases. So, there's no theatrical release date, so who knows when these were released. Evil Laugh, I don't know, there's no date that I can find. So, I decided to put them in June, just kind of middle of the year. They may have been released before, after. I'm just going to stick them in the middle of the year, just for, law of averages kind of thing. July, there's nothing, and then August, of course, we get Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, the next Friday film in the franchise. September, nothing, kind of surprising, but then, picks up back October and November. We get Sorority House Massacre, Body Count, and Slaughter High, and Dreamaniac to close out the year. So pretty evenly distributed, if you take those 3 films I put in June there. But yeah, like I said, if you look at the films released from January to May, Girl School Screamers, April Fool's Day, Killer Party, Chopping Mall, Bloodhook, that's a decent amount of films, some fun, really solid films. And then again, yeah, like the June releases, I don't know, I'll just throw them on here, just we don't know. But then, like I said, at the end of the year, August to December, you got the Friday the 13th, Part 6, Body Count, Sorority House Massacre, Slaughter High, Dreamaniac. So, I would say this is like a typical number of releases. But, it's kind of surprising how we got some at the early part of the year. At the, end of the year, we usually get this amount. So, but, overall, it's kind of an average year for the releases, I think. All right, let's go ahead and just take a look at some stats here. So we'll start off by looking at some of the budgets here. So the first thing that stands out here, looking at these budgets, April Fool's Day with a $5 million budget, kind of surprising to me, to be honest. it's a good looking film. It's shot well. It looks nice. But I don't know where the $5 million went to be honest. There's no crazy practical effects or anything like that going on. So it's a little surprising to be honest. Now, Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, $3 million. That sounds right. At this point, these Friday films, they're the average budgets are around between $3 to $4 million is where they were sitting. So that sounds about right. Slaughter High, 2.1 million. Um, yeah, that sounds about right. Now, Chopping Mall, I'm a little surprised at the $800,000 budget, just because um, the mall that it was filmed in, I'm assuming was a active working mall. It seemed really at the time really modern. It looked all the stores were filled. It looked like it was an active mall. So maybe it's not at that time wasn't expensive to shoot in a mall. I don't know. I'm shooting after hours or on weekends or holidays. I don't know. But they had those robots and they had some pretty some practical effects for the time with like the lasers and stuff. So 800,000 seems low to me. So they did a really good job with that budget. I thought, because the film looked good and it was kind of like an action film as well. So some explosions and guns and yeah, I feel like $800,000. They did really well. Dreamaniac, $60,000. Yeah, that sounds about right, to be honest. So, yeah, I wish we had more information, but just the five films. So now, if we go take a look at some of the box office returns, again, only three films, so I really wish we had more information. But Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, just under $20 million on a $3 million budget. That's really good. I'm sure they were happy with that. Now, at this point, the Friday films, they're making less and less money to be sure. But they're still doing well, so that's probably why they kept making them. They've got, well, a couple more years left. April Fool's Day, almost $13 million on that $5 million budget. So yeah, it didn't do as well as the Friday film in terms of profits, but it yeah, I'm sure they were happy with that. That's a pretty good return. People obviously were going out to see these films, and that was one of the ones released in March. So people were probably itching for these films. They didn't get one in '85. We got like a Friday film and a Nightmare film in '85, and that was about it. So yeah, by the time March came, April Fool's Day was probably people went out and saw it. So, and then Killer Party, $681,000. Now, I don't know the budget. I couldn't find the budget for this film, but I I I feel like the budget probably wasn't too much lower than that. So I don't know if they made any money or not. Maybe they did. Maybe the budget was a little lower. But it probably wasn't too successful. Now it's a Canadian film, so I don't know what the release was like in the States, in Canada. I don't know. So yeah, not a lot of information, unfortunately. I wish I had the box office return for films like Slaughter High and Chopping Mall. Even Evil Laugh, I would like to know how those did. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. All right, so yeah, that's about it for the year. Looking at some of the stats, so let's just go ahead and just kind of wrap it up with some final thoughts here. All right, so up until this point in the '80s, the slasher genre had seen some incredible success. Sure, there were some ups and some downs to be sure, but as a whole, the popularity with the general public never really waned. Even in the ghost town of slasher releases that was 1985. The box office returns showed that there was still an appetite for these types of films, thanks in large part to the next releases within the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. But the people still went and saw these films, and they still did really well. So by 1986, the demand for the slasher film hadn't, like I said, hadn't really changed all that much in my opinion. What was changing, however, was the the style of films that were being released. Thanks to the incredible success of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, more and more slashers were being released that included at least some supernatural elements. You know, including even the Nightmare on Elm Street film's biggest rivals in the Friday the 13th films. Um, it was something that was became obvious to the filmmakers and the audience that this was the trend where these films were heading, and like I said, Friday the 13th even went there with it. Now, in addition to this emerging trend within the slasher genre, 1986 kind of also saw the emergence of more and more slashers getting the straight-to-video treatment. As the 80s continued and the VCR, became more affordable and more accessible to the average home, it's no wonder that more of these films were being made directly for home video. And let's be honest, no subgenre of film may have been more appropriate for this than the slasher film. It just feels like slashers and VHS go hand in hand. They're kind of a perfect match for each other. So so yeah, not only do I think 1986 is a pretty important year within the slasher genre, I just think it's just a really solid year with a really good amount of great slashers being released, all throughout the year. Um, and it's good to see because 1984 was a really solid year, and then 1985 happened. So it's good to see that 1986 we have this bounce back, and the rest of the decade it's gonna go strong. Now the quality of the films coming out, that's something that can be debated, and as we get to 87, 88, and 89, we'll take a look at these films, and we'll examine it, and we'll see exactly what the quality of them are. But in terms of the appetite for these films, and just the amount of these films that will continue to be released during the 80s, it at this point in the 80s, it's still going pretty strong. So it's good to see. All right, guys. So yeah, that is it. That is the 1986, the year in slashers. So I didn't do it last time, obviously for 1985, but the next video on this channel, it will be a top five, my top five slashers of 1986. So if you wanna check that one out, stay tuned. If you haven't seen any of, or if you missed some of the other year in slasher videos, I'll put some of the links down below in the description, but I'll also put a link on the screen at the end here for, the playlist for the year in slasher videos. All right, guys. So, yeah, that's about it. So, until next time. All right. See ya.